Hello, welcome to Book and Lounge, a podcast that helps you find your next great read. If you're enjoying the podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, download, and share with your friends, family, and colleagues. Your support really means a lot to us. The more you share, the more we can bring more exciting episodes to you. Now let's get back to today's episode. Yeah, very quiet today. What's going on?
The Pope died. That's what is causing the silence.
Ah, right, I see.
And it's in morning. The Pope died.
Yeah, the Pope died.
Hey, why are you sniggering?
She's ignoring you.
Sorry?
I said, why are you sniggering? When I said the Pope died, you started sniggering.
Yeah,
I feel like they... Oh, no,
Sorry.
can. I was going to say, they must have really pumped him up for something yesterday to be able to say that last, whatever, speech. Because even then, he sounded like he was on death's door. So I don't know what they gave him. And I think the moment he was done, they brought him back and they're just like, it's fine. Right, we're done. It's okay. So, yeah.
I think the most hilarious bit is he met what's his name? He met Jade.
The American guy.
Yeah.
He hasn't got the will to go on.
They spoke before. They even,
Well,
I know he spoke, but did he speak to him? How did it even go?
There's footage of he went to meet him. So
Who are you talking about, Kate?
JD, the vice president, he met the Pope.
And the Pope died.
And then the Pope died. That's what I think is quite.
Probably what's in there.
That's the headline.
And now on social media, there's so many memes of when Trump first met him and he was well, and when Trump tried to hold his hand, he just smacked it away. That's all I'm seeing now on social media. Up, you can literally see him tapping his hand. Let's hold. He just smacks his hand away. And that's what I'm seeing now.
Has Trump made a comment yet? When I last tuned in, he hadn't, all the world leaders are rushing to give their condolences, and nobody'd heard from him. Has he said something now?
I don't listen to the news, so I have no idea. No idea.
Has anyone seen the film Conclave?
No, that's what I was about to say. I think that's the more exciting part. The nomination
really
of the new. I might just.
I really enjoyed it. If you have the chance, watch it. It's about the politics.
Yes, a friend of mine keeps urging me to see it. I haven't yet.
He has rest in peace, Pope Francis! Exclamation mark. May God bless him and all who love him! Exclamation mark. So. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Most coherent messages.
Exclamation mark. Yeah, but hey, it's Trump. What else would I expect? Yeah, so Conclave. I think I might just make that my film for tonight. I wonder who the next one is going to be. But anyhow, we're here to talk about Safiya Sinclair's memoir, How to Save Babylon. Yeah. There's a lot to say about this book. But before, I guess, we get deep into the conversation, I just wanted to start with just what you all thought about it.
Can I repeat what Derek Walcott said?
Go on then.
I think that sums up everything for me in terms of what I feel about the book. So when Derek Walcott was mentoring her or giving her advice about her poetry, since he is or was well established, and she was up and coming as such. He said, the lines need space to sing. These images are good, but lose potency when you string 4 of them together at once. And for me, that sums up the whole book. I did enjoy it, but I found the whole poetic expression overpowering the narrative. For me anyway, that's it. But I still enjoyed it.
I would agree almost exactly with what Taiwo said about it. It was a nice book, and I did enjoy reading it, but it was too packed. It's interesting, the information about Rastafarianism, which I didn't know before, and overall, yes, it's enjoyable.
Wow, agreement has broken out. I enjoyed it. I think after our last discussion, there were various things which I'm sure we'll pick up on, which perhaps we'll talk about the role of an editor and maybe who the intended audience for this, because I found myself going back and finding more of a formula second time round than perhaps I noticed first time round. It was enjoyable for what it was.
Yeah, I agree with everyone else. The poetry element was just, it overshadowed the narrative a bit too much, which also then I think made it quite long, as well as it being very repetitive in areas. And I think, yeah, parts of her life, I didn't think we needed to hear everything. I felt like we got the gist of what was going on during those periods, but it dragged through certain parts of her life. So yeah, and I don't know where the editor was or what was going on there, but it definitely needed editing. Still enjoyed it. It's a really interesting life, and I like to learn. I learned a lot about Rastafarianism, but it was just a bit too long, and the way it was written like that.
And yeah, I think, Kay, you're right. There's definitely agreement on this. I did enjoy reading it. I did enjoy learning about Rastafarianism. I did enjoy learning about just Jamaica and the effect of colonialism. Like with you guys, I thought it was way too lyrical, too much poetry, not enough prose for my liking. And also the pace. I don't think she got the pace right. It just dragged on for longer than it needed to be. So definitely agree with everything that you have all said. So then it addresses a lot of themes, and I think we've kind of already touched on Rastafarianism. But then alongside that, there's also colonialism and how that's impacted Jamaica. We had tourism, a lot of misogyny, the close-knit relationship between the siblings. I thought that was done really well. And so I just wanted to just really explore those themes in context of the memoir. And I just start off with culture and identity. So Safiya is brought up within a very strict Rastafarian family. Her father basically makes the rules, and what he says goes. So he controls every aspect of their lives. The mother tries, in some respects, to still give them an education and still show them that there's life outside of Rastafarianism. So how do you think she conveys her upbringing in relation to the Rastafarian culture and the nuances within that, navigating that with the outside world? Because they're very diametrically opposed.
I think that's, for me, that's one of the core themes of this book, this sense of us and them. Mm-hmm. And I think it comes through not just in the narrative and things that happen, but you see it quite in the description. She double downs on it when she's in school, just this sense of how she sees the world and how she makes friends, and discomfort or not known, like the wider popular culture, and she very much links to that, her sheltered upbringing. Even when she's talking about, I think there's a bit where she goes off to her grandmother's, so her father's gone away and she's gone off to her grandmother's. Even in the food they eat, it just feels like, she articulates it as a complete other world. There's something that's over there and they have to make do with what's in their small world. But I think as you go on, that us and them starts to blur. Mm. I think her being isolated over here very much hinges on her believing in her father and respecting everything she says. But I think what you see unravel over time is this belief in everything he says. And so maybe she comes a bit close, the us and them starts to come a bit closer, because it feels like it's been divided by everything her father says. And
also in the earlier parts of the book, obviously she's younger, so more impressionable. And also the timing, it's pre-internet era. So I think it's a combination of her being younger and also the fact that there's less access to information that's widely available. But as we go along, as she's growing older and her world is expanding, it's expanding even further because of the access to the internet that she has, the schools that she goes to, probably even the schools that her siblings go to as well, because their education is of quite a high standard given their socioeconomic background. The fact that they tend to get scholarships or they have ways of accessing education that is, you might say, punching above their weight. They're going to places, they're being educated in places that people like them, for want of a better expression, wouldn't normally go to. And I think that begins to impact her feeling of her father as God and the pedestal upon which she put her father, all knowing, all seeing, always right, righteous, and all the rest. And the blurring between her father and Haile Selassie as well, the stern expression of his photograph, where when you're moving around the room, it's as if to say the person's, the picture, the eyes of the picture are following you. That's what she seemed to see. And it blurs between, is it her father watching her, or is it Haile Selassie, or is it God, or are they all one and the same kind of thing? So I saw that, and also the fact that poverty is a constant companion throughout the whole of the book, and its impact on them as a family and their worldview. The fact that they always seem to be struggling is a never-ending struggle for survival, as well as struggling to survive her father.
Had her father been successful in his musical career, do you think he would have been any different?
I do think he would have been different. I think a large part of also how controlling he was is because everything that he hoped for just fell apart, and he lost control there. And so this was the only way he was able to control. So I do think if he became successful, even if he didn't blow up, but he wasn't singing in hotels or still somehow able to make his music and be a bit more independent, I generally don't believe he would have been as controlling as he was. Because I think also they did get the internet. I think he just used that, even though you think that kind of opens up more for you. I think he actually used that to find more like-minded people and make this world even smaller, because he'll be using the internet for like conspiracy theories and all of that sort of thing. And then he met with, was it Budani and that group? Like, he separated himself from his original group, which seemed fine, and kind of shifted to meet more people that kind of fit in with his mindset and where he saw their life being. So yeah, I don't think it would have been the same.
I agree with that, because if you look at the parts of the book where he's in Japan and before it's sort of all gone wrong, and he seems to be making a bit of money and he's sending money back and he's buying a car, and I thought he was getting well contaminated with Babylon. It struck me that it struck me through the whole book really that he's very conflicted about the evils of what he calls Babylon, but desire for the trappings of some of that lifestyle, which is natural, isn't it? I mean, it's a very common problem. But yes, I think he would have been more relaxed. But I think going back to her being isolated I think it's interesting how she's isolated because she believes so strongly in what her father's telling her, isn't she? So she puts up the barriers that he wants to be put up, because actually they seem to be, to quite a reasonable extent, meeting other people, going to different things. But when she's at her grandma Paula's, and she's, they're eating these things, but she's worrying about this conflict, and she's quite a little girl. So I think it's as she gets older and starts to see the flaws in her father that she can break away a bit.
The title is How to Say Babylon, and I just wondered if you've had any thoughts into the significance of why she chose that as a title. I tried to think, and I really couldn't think what the significance of the title is, How to Say Babylon?
I confess, hadn't thought deeply about that. But now you've asked, I wonder if it was his mantra. Because we spoke before about religion and the significance of religion in this book. And I think I'm still of the same opinion. It's significant in so much as that's the faith she was raised in. And that was the excuse he used. But I really did get this strong sense of so much of it was his own ideology, his own quite extreme interpretation of this lifestyle that he could then use to control. Trina talks about, he shunned it but seemed quite enamored with some aspects of the lifestyle. One scene that stuck out for me is where she's told off at school, but the teacher probably goes a bit far. And she goes home and she tells her mum, and then she builds up. She's waiting for her father to kind of puff out his chest and defend her almost. And he doesn't. The one person she needed him to stand up to, he was a bit, oh no, So even he, is this big Rastafarian, Babylon and I and all over the place, is still like cowering in the face of like authority or traditionally seen authority. So that whole symbolism of his image blurring into the picture of Haile Selassie, he's her God, he says her word. I just think he is just the insecure, vulnerable man who can't push back in wider society. So he controls what he can, and that's his family. And he's got this kind of Rastafarian framework which to articulate and justify it.
He also just he is someone that doesn't want to hold himself accountable for anything or learn from his behavior. Like, the reason why you're getting kicked out of these hotels, if you're going off at the hotel manager, why are you this is your job, so why are you going off at the hotel manager blaming Babylon? No, you like, that's just not how you behave. You've got a family. I think sometimes you have to suck things up, and you didn't. You've got a family, suck it up and do what you need to do and let it go. And even with what happened in Japan, I can't remember, is it the same friend that kind of screwed him over the first time, screwed him over again? So I don't know. I think the father, his friend's father did, and then I don't know if it was the friend this time that did after.
Yes.
Stuff like that. I will just be like, do I want to work with this person again? I don't know. I just, like, he's going on about trust. That's someone I wouldn't trust again. So I'm not sure. He didn't think things through. He didn't hold himself accountable. I don't think he was very smart in many areas around that with business and things. I just think if something's gone wrong the first time, learn from it. And he just didn't do that. So
yeah, I just wanted to say, I think as Annette has said, accountability is definitely not one of his strong points. For him to be accountable, therefore he'd have to be responsible. It's easier for him to point the finger than for him to accept, his own flaws, his own shortcomings.
And yet he held himself out as the figure of authority. Whatever he says was the word. So it's interesting that he himself was not willing to take responsibility for some of the things that he was doing and some of the things that went wrong. It's quite an interesting contradiction.
And also that outright hypocrisy where he would laud and big up a person to their face, but immediately they've left the scene, he would then start to backbite. For example, when, the instance where she finally left home and she called the police, then the police arrived and he kind of switched, almost Jekyll and Hyde. And then immediately the police left, then he switched back again. So it's just, it's just 100% hypocrisy. One face for the world and another face for your family. Your family you will crush under your heel. The world you will become very malleable and adapt. In order not to be broken, you will bend any way that you see fit.
Yeah, and I suppose, like, when you bring up that situation, like, I imagine there's an element of self-preservation going on as well. You're not going to, like, react that way to police. If they've got guns, they can behave in any way and you'll have no recourse. But it's this sense of his family bearing the brunt of his bitterness, I think, that comes through. And you see it through the eyes of the child. She's got no way to fight back. And I think maybe we'll go on to talk about the mother. I don't want to say she's complicit, but clearly she's she's got her own negotiations going on that eventually she decides, at the end we see her walk away. But I just was going to the highlights, and there was a line that stuck out to me about this sense of how everything comes from him. And I think in some ways Babylon is quite ambiguous. It's whoever he says it is, right? Whoever he tells her is the terrible person at the time is Babylon. So she says, so we got our news of Babylon like roots, wine, and bitters from my father's mouth. He was our god of history, god of media, and high priest all in one. It's whatever he says, the ultimate dictator. I like him today, tomorrow I need you to hate him. This is good, tomorrow I need you to respect them. So it's all about him.
Tyra, were you adding something?
Yeah, I wanted to say it reminds me of Trump in some ways, that kind of thing where you're reminded, like, but you said this and that, you're on the record. It's like, did I say that? Just like, wow.
So can I just say this? And like, this is a complete tangent, but it just reminded me of something. So she goes to her grandparents and she's told, I think it's not her biological grandfather, but the man of the house. He calls out Haile Selassie's hypocrisy. And there is a book about Haile Selassie. And, he was an authoritarian figure. And apparently one of the things he would used to do is he'd never write things down. And he would, according to this biography, he would never write things down. And he would say things quite quietly. And then it was up to you to get the right interpretation. So if you got it wrong, that's not what I said. So this sense of, sorry, I don't know why I thought of that, because it's these authoritarian figures who just, it's to each their own, it's whatever they say at the time goes. But just that particular detail just struck me. It just made perhaps full circle. That's something he was accused of himself, or he was said to have, in a way that Haile Selassie was said to have behaved in his court.
So then, I guess the character, or one of the I don't know if I would call it qualities of a dictator, is this ability to just change your mind, say things, and then just change your mind about it, saying you've either never said it or you've been misunderstood. It's basically to confuse people, and that's one of the things that Trump seems to be doing really well.
Either that or I didn't mean that.
Yeah, and they always struggle with people who can speak back to them, or don't take it on. So I think there's a bit, perhaps, I think when they're living by the sea and they're still living with his in-laws, so her sister, and I think she describes a couple of Safiya's aunts being quite like comfortable in their sexuality, and they were outgoing, and there was one who would argue back and forth with him. And she says, when she could no longer endure his lecturing, she says this of her aunt about her father. She rolled her eyes, told him to shut up, pointed towards the road, telling him, "Galang, back where you come from." So it's like he couldn't. There's something about him needing a meek audience.
Yeah,
like you can't be a dictator around people who don't take you seriously. And it's something about children and their eyed-wide innocence and naivety who just drink it all in. So
yeah, because I guess they're innocent and still malleable. You can groom them.
Malleable and can't see the absurdity. I think I said before, he reads like a caricature to me. I don't doubt he was like this, but he just sounds so extreme. Like, do Rastafarians all go around I in every other sentence? I don't think they do, but he's like the worst extreme version of it. And there's no one to question him. Like, perfect.
But don't you think his behaviour, it all stems really out of his own childhood, his lack of connection? He doesn't have any idea who his father is, and his mother didn't bring him up and then rejects him later. He's desperately trying to create a family that he can cling on to and keep there and not lose, and all that controllingness to me is about that. And he's got no idea of how to have a family but still allow people their individuality and to be able to branch out a bit. That to him, it seems to me that to him is too scary. That the moment somebody's got an idea of their own that they want to pursue, he's probably in a panic that his family that he's made. That's what very much comes across at the end of the book, which is rather sad, I think, because when I read the book, I thought that, I've said it before, but she has written this book, and in my opinion, her primary audience in a way is her father. And she really wants just as he wants to keep a family, she would like to have that relationship that she had when she was a very little girl. And she never questioned him. And because I suppose he didn't have to be harsh in those days because she was too little.
Do you feel that he adopted Rastafarianism because it met his desires and needs then? Because he wasn't born a Rastafarian. He kind of just went to this commune as he was searching and then joined. So do you feel that he was kind of pushed by his experience and his desire to create a family and a comfort around him into Rastafarianism?
I think so. I mean, it didn't have to be Rastafarianism. It could have been any religion that that had created that community for him, I think. But it happened that it was Rastafarianism. And then he is attached to that. I think it could have been any probably fairly fundamentalist type of religion that he would have met his needs.
Although Rastafarianism, because it's so malleable, it lends itself to someone like him. So it particularly suits a person of his particular bent because he can make the religion so personal. Whatever I say, it is according to my understanding today, and then tomorrow, as my understanding changes, so the religion itself has changed. I think that whole idea of being a dictator and also being an infallible dictator seems to appeal to him very much.
What was so bad about Babylon? And did he have a point forbidding them from doing some of the things that he forbade?
That's a good question.
I mean, a lot of the examples he brought up weren't great, I suppose. So, what happened to him getting screwed over? That's not great. And he has a point. When for example, I know her mum told her not to tell him about Cassie getting pregnant. But, I understand why, as a father, for a daughter of 14, to get herself pregnant, he might not want that for his daughters either. So I get it. But then there's other things which obviously just made no sense. But I think that's when it, like you said, Tyler, about the molding, and do you know what, you're going to wear long skirts now only, not trousers, and Lidge could go out and pretty much do whatever he wanted when the woman had to stay at home. That's when it just gets a bit, for me personally, that doesn't make any sense. But I understood why he maybe have put down certain rules because of the examples that he gave, but there's no need to go to an extreme sense. Just sit your kids down saying, this is what some people can be like in life. Look out for these situations and use discernment and go ahead and learn from it, not stay indoors and within the gate and never leave again because you're never going to learn. But again, that just goes back to his elements. I see where he's coming from, but I don't condone what he did. That's what I'm saying.
I feel that way as well, because I think that there's aspects of the way they were brought up and the way they were kept to be, only play amongst themselves and to be, very much within the family, that quite probably contributed to how well they did at school. They seemed to be at home playing. They played board games and things a lot, didn't they? She mentions the parents playing backgammon. And then there's another time when she's talking about them playing board games. And I feel like the fact that they were isolated from just running around the street playing with their friends kind of thing, and they would have probably read more and discussed more and so on, that had some beneficial aspects to them. It's just like you said, Annette, it's just he goes way to an extreme that was unnecessary, probably.
I imagine, I agree with that, and I imagine partly that's what's seductive about the faith in some ways, because it is seeming to answer some problems, right? Look at the way people are living. Look at the ills of society. We're going to live in a way which shields us from that. But then, like everyone said, he takes it to an extreme. And then I think she does talk more widely about the history of Rastafarianism in Jamaica, you know, the colonial context, and these people have come together and they try to make a life, you know, communal living, they're persecuted. So in the face of all of that, right, his choices don't seem like the wrong ones. It just sort of becomes the slippery slope where he can decide where the line is, and the line just keeps on moving. It's not fixed, and that's what I think is the challenges. But it's interesting because isn't he almost a victim of the attitude he then furthers, if that's the right term? But his mother gets pregnant very young and she's shunned.
Yeah.
And rather than saying, let's not shun young women, we need to support them, he says, I'm not going to make you one of those women who's ever shunned. So he's, in trying to separate himself from it, I feel like he's part of it in some way, and there are other attitudes that come into play as well.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are other bits, you know, she makes the beginning of her childhood, it sounds idyllic, like living by the sea, and that, you know, that existence in nature and knowing the names of flowers and birds and etc. You know, I find it interesting, like things like the ITAL diet, and okay, for some people it's extreme, but don't we call that like clean living and like vegan today? Like it's all there. It's all, you know, even a broken clock is right twice a day. There's some element of truth that allows him to keep spinning it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, Kate, as you said, that the idea of trying to protect his daughters from the general populace's sexual immorality, you don't want your daughters to get pregnant. He's focusing on the daughter because the daughter can carry the child. He's not focusing on the son. He's not focusing on the boy that's going to get the girl pregnant, because she can't get pregnant on her own unless it's an immaculate conception. When he talks about the son, it's like, protect yourself, not protect your girlfriend. Just go out there and sow your wild oats, be like me, you know, have all these aunties all over the place. So he seems to not want to address the fundamental issue, which is the fact that he's afraid, and that fear is leading to him going to the extreme in terms of trying to protect or control his daughters. And at the same time, it's like he can't trust himself. He knows as a man what he's into. Back in the day, you're this righteous man that is stroking your precept. That was just hilarious. You know, the beard is a precept. It took me ages to work out, what is this precept? What is it? It's just so hypocritical or superficial.
But isn't that, so I think that's such a good point. Isn't that true of like a lot of religions? It's about controlling the woman's body and the woman's behavior. So it's, I don't want to start a riot, but come on, isn't this like, this sounds a little bit familiar to the woman must cover herself as not to tempt the men, or, you know, there are some tropes coming through here, but the hypocrisy of it just leaps off the page.
The poor weak man is fascinated by the woman's body and the fact that she can produce, and he's attracted to it, and yet he doesn't want to be attracted to it. But obviously he's so weak that she has to cover herself so that he cannot. It just goes on, wheels within wheels, really. All religion.
That's why I was confused. I was like, you're shouting at yourself, saying these will never be my girls. While you're still, I was just like, stop then. Like, you're getting yourself angry while you're watching this. So you know he knew he was doing the wrong thing, but then justified it by saying, I have to watch this, remind myself, or to remind Rabbit or whoever it is that these will never be my daughters. But then that was
someone's daughter.
Someone's daughter. But I just I don't know. I laughed during that scene. I just didn't understand what was going through his. I did, but I didn't at the same time.
Spoken about the dad a lot, so I think we should probably just move on to the mum. So she herself had a traumatic childhood as well, and then she meets him, and then they go off to this commune. They both become Rastafarians and come back to raise their family. She pretty much goes along with everything that he says. Every time there's some kind of conflict, she just lights up some weed. She just lights up her weed and then smokes away. At the same time, she's actually herself quite a strong character, because I don't think that her children would have gotten to where they did without her. And I think it was her that actually held together the family and then helped the children to succeed. Yeah, despite the control. Sorry, okay, carry on.
No, I'd agree with that. Like, I would just, when you say she went along with it, I would frame it as she chose her battles. I think like she'd made some sort of deal, and she knew when to push and when to pull. And yeah, I think maybe what it's read like to me is that she learned to build up her children or protect them in different ways. So through education, she was very supportive. There's the story like if she ever Safiya talks about going to school and not having lunch, and her mum would always be there. Don't know how she made it to 3 schools, with all the other kids, but she'd always be there. So you definitely felt like she was a shield around the children, but thought she came across as depressed, like the amount of smoking she did. That's just sounded a bit more than recreational. Yeah, I think she was savvy rather than just throwing her hands up thinking there's nothing I can do about this.
It's clear that she didn't agree with some of the things that some of the views that he held about Babylon. For example, the food, because she would allow the children to go to the grandparents and actually eat whatever they wanted to eat when he was away. So I just always wondered why she just didn't voice her opinion and then just stand up to him.
I don't think she'll be alive. I really don't.
You think?
Yeah. He attacked Safiya much later. No, he attacked the kids from a young age. He may say he would never hit his wife. I 100% believe he had it in him to physically abuse her. I do. I think he would have hit her 100%.
Do you think that he actually did and Safiya just doesn't write about it?
Maybe, but I don't believe he wouldn't have touched her.
Isn't she keeping the peace? She's as a mum.
Yeah. I wouldn't speak. There's just no need. It'll be too much. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, when the father attacks Safiya, to the extent that Safiya then leaves home, was it, an ordinary assault or an attempted assault, or was it more that he was having some kind of psychotic breakdown?
I didn't believe it was a breakdown.
Doesn't she writes about when he first beats them, right? They've eaten something they shouldn't have or whatever, and then he comes in and beats them.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound terrible, but after I reread that section, and I thought, you and thousands of other Jamaican kids across that island were being disciplined in that way. Is it?
But to that extent,
getting beat with a leather belt.
Red belt.
Yeah.
Some of them.
This wasn't uncommon. Like, there's a generation who will joke about being disciplined in that way. It's very easy now to come and read these books with this, like, our sensibilities of today. That's not how you discipline children. But if I listen to the stories like my parents tell me about when they were disciplined when they were younger, getting beat with a leather belt was... Nobody would have told them that, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah.
It was horrible. It was horrible to read, and she does this very good job of conveying the fear in this sense of like the Rubicon's been crossed now because he's beat us, and we're never going to look at him in the same way. They're cowering in fear, but as a form of discipline, I'd say that was probably going on in homes up and down the island. I really do.
But do you not think he lost control sometimes? It made it seem like it was more than the norm. I don't know. The belt was never, no belt was used on me, but it sounded like it was just a bit more than it would be normal. So that's why and then I don't know if it's sometimes for the reasonings. I wouldn't think having an unripened fruit would be a reason to use a belt, but I'm not sure if that might have been another reason as well.
He was taking out his frustrations because had he not come home early and something hadn't worked out at the job that he was at. So he was taking out his frustrations on them. Yeah,
so two things are true. One, I think that way of disciplining children would have been acceptable in that time and for some time after. But I think you're right that what comes across is the loss of control. You wouldn't discipline kids in that way, because it is the loss of control. You are taking your frustrations out as an adult on a child, but unfortunately, I don't think she was the only one who would have been at the receiving end of that type of treatment.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the mum, what motivated her? Because she was quite enterprising, as I said. So with the food, with her teaching, what is it that motivated her? And she's described as someone that all children liked. What is it about her that brought out that, I guess, those qualities?
In the beginning, the mother's obviously very impressed with her husband or her partner, because he's the one who said, you will have children. And she's clear. I mean, it would appear that she's very good with children, and not just her own, that she attracts children, she likes them, she gets a good relationship with them. So having, been able to have children, and not just one, first of all, that would make her tend to believe in other stuff that he might say and want to support his views on things. But then as time goes on, she'd be the last person who'd want to, disrupt their family unit. Isn't that what holds a lot of families together for many years? I feel there's a lot about their relationship and the whole book, which is very common, just like Kay's saying about the type of disciplining going on that was considered acceptable, with the assaults on young girls, which are just sort of hushed up under the carpet type of thing. These are things that go on in society, and now we talk about them, but we didn't talk about them for a long time.
Also, I just wanted to add the idea of belonging, because it's both the mother and also the father. It's like they're both searching for belonging, and the belonging in a family. And so they've created this, not necessarily a perfect family, but they've created their own family. So where both the mother and the father have been rejected by their own biological families, the family that they've created in themselves or of themselves is not something that either of them would really want to throw away on a whim. It would have to be something really serious before they would throw it away or move away from it. So although in different ways, I think they're both in some ways looking for the same thing, which is that sense of belonging that can be found in family.
They're quite isolated because of their religion and outward appearance, because they have dreadlocks. So everywhere they go, people look down on them. And the children are picked on in school. The children hardly have any friends because of that isolation and because of what general society thinks about Rastafarianism. So I think I kind of understand what you are saying, Tyler, this sense of belonging. They belong to this community, and then they belong together, and he's there to hold their family together. So I get what you're saying. I did want to come back to the role of education, and especially in relation to the children. All four of them will do really well, and end up, with the exception of Lidge, end up at top universities in the US. What role did the mother play in that? And also, why is education so important in their lives?
I feel like in this book it's framed as a way out.
Mm-hmm.
Like knowing things, like from if you a way out of their economic situation is for her to do well academically, and it gets her a scholarship so she can overcome that boundary. But then quite literally it's a way for them to get out of Jamaica. And I think it was hinted at, didn't she have her own aspirations which were thwarted? So then she invests in her children. So it does feel like it's the route out for everyone. And even on a more fundamental level, right, that she believes everything her father tells us until she's educated on more worldly matters, and then she has the means to question and challenge and think for herself on some things.
Now, you said that in this book is framed that way, but isn't it framed that way worldwide? Isn't that the same things that we're telling children who are growing up in Africa? Isn't that the same thing people in Asia are telling their children? Go to school, get an education, you get a even in this country, and we're saying that. Go to school, use your education to get a decent job.
I think it is still the narrative we tell everyone, and for good reason. But there are other sides to it as well, perhaps, and I don't think it works out for everyone. You know, the flip side of, at a family level, it's great. These kids have conventional success. They've gone in and they've gone to great universities in the US, as have many other bright young people from the island and the region. And it's a brain drain. So, yeah, I know what you mean. It is, but I think there are other sides to it that are perhaps not talked. But I think this is one of the conventional things about this book. For all its subject matter, I think it is actually quite formulaic. And I think there's some well-worn tropes in there, one of which is just if you work hard and study, you can go off and do anything you want to do.
Okay, so I think I've noticed, so you mentioned earlier on the stereotypical Rastafarian, and then now pushing education, you know, if you work hard enough, you get somewhere. Or what else do you think that is formulaic about this book? And why do you think it maybe should have been edited better?
So I think there's also the story of the ugly duckling, you know, how she talks about how she describes herself in comparison to her school friends, you know, her rough hair, unkempt, all of this. Roughnecks, right? This is what these little kids are growing up. And then she becomes a model, she becomes this very beautiful whatever. I'm not saying it should have been edited differently. I just think that's the way it's been edited. I think I am taken with the point that in some way she's writing to her father and she wants him to understand her and see that. I do get that, and that's something I thought about after our discussion. I also think this is for a particular type of audience as well. I was just doing some more digging around the book where it's been promoted, the shows she's gone on to be interviewed. This is a Rastafarian for Beginners 101, right? And here's this little roughneck Rastafarian girl who grows up with a terrible father, but she studies hard and she goes off to America and she becomes beautiful and she becomes a model and she teaches at a top university. Do you know what I mean? It's very like, oh, wow, like, you know, she started down here and she persevered and she ended up here. The hero journey.
I just feel like maybe that's me then, because I don't know that much about Rastafarianism. So I learned that and I was like, oh, like, wow, like I might have been one of those people. There's just stuff that I learned that I had absolutely no idea about. And it's great that she's now gone on to a top university.
But it does seem as if the things that she's aspiring to are Babylonian. The top university and education, money, status. These are all things in Babylon, but she seems to aspire to a normal life, normal in quote.
And I'm not saying these are bad things to aspire to, but that's the narrative, right?
Don't you think that's inevitable? Because the people who come from whatever family, Rastafarian or not, who work hard at school, but then never really do anything, they don't write books, do they? The people who succeed in some sense or another, who get to write the book that people want to read about. So I think it's inevitable.
Yeah, that's true. Like, this wouldn't have been interesting if she trained, you know, she then became an English teacher and, you know, was teaching at the grammar school in Kingston or whatever. this story could have ended many other ways and seen her be okay.
She could have got pregnant. She could have got pregnant quite early on.
God forbid for her father.
Yeah, like I'm saying, it's not that it's a bad thing, but I do think there is a formula here, and maybe in one way it's good, right? Because it's good that these types of stories, you can shine a light on these different experiences. But this book doesn't feel very different to some of the other books I've read, which are about young people who face hardship and then they overcome and they thrive.
It's a story of life, isn't it?
So,
Is it?
Jackie, there's one thing you said. Oh, sorry, Katrina. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that although I'm one of the people complaining about how dense the text is and everything. And yet at the same time, it still was the sort of lyrical aspect of her writing that encouraged me to carry on reading. And, I'm sort of like, oh, there's too much of this, but it is very lovely. So irrespective of the story which shows her going from rags to riches, so to speak, although I doubt is she very rich? Not many poets are very rich, I wouldn't have thought. But maybe
She's
she
famous.
teaches somewhere, does she? So maybe, anyway, she's changed her life from the beginning. But it is more the actual writing, the descriptions of places and so on. It just needed, like the critic said, it just needs a little bit more space.
Yeah, no.
So, Jackie, you said something about like when you're talking about their education, but with the exception of Lidge, which I didn't really agree. I think Lidge also seemed he seemed excellent as well academically. I just felt, I don't know. I think just things got to him a lot differently than to the girls. I guess he didn't seem to cope well at university. And she said that I remember she said that one line about when the parents first gave them like weed, and then I think she was saying, me and my sisters never smoked again, but for Lidge it would continue. Like, I just think things, unfortunately, like mentally or whatever, kind of got in the way of maybe him being able to excel further than his sisters, but he still seemed academically quite brilliant.
Oh, I absolutely agree. What I meant was that the others went to the US. He's the only one that stayed in Jamaica. Yeah, so I think that's what I meant. I mean, because he went to study to become a lawyer, and he only dropped out because they wanted him to cut off his locks. I don't think he would have dropped out. Yeah.
It seemed like he was struggling as well, but maybe it was that. I felt like he would have financially
he was struggling. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think he
wasn't going lectures. Like, I don't know. I kind of got this impression he seemed a bit depressed, but maybe it was a lot to it as well. Okay.
Yeah, I think he was depressed because he did stand out as someone in Jamaica with locks on his head.
This would have been it would have been mid-noughties by that point, wouldn't it? Mm-hmm. So that still was just uncommon. Even then,
I think well, from what I know is it's more, if it's Bob Marley and a musician, it's acceptable. But I think in just general society, if you want to be working in a bank, I think it was still a problem. I don't know what it is like now, but I think at that time it was still a problem. I mean, I go to places and people assume I'm a musician because of my hair. If I tell them what they do, they're like, really? With that hair?
Yeah.
So I think people still hold a lot of prejudices about people who lock their hair.
I was just looking online. I don't know if she's wealthy, but she's Insta famous, shall we say? She looks like she's living her best life.
I started to follow her because she does look like she's living her best life. So I started to follow.
She really does. And it's funny because Howard Dejani Sinclair, I assume that's her father, Jaliv, whatever. I can't remember when this book was first published, but he's got one of those. He's got one of those motivational quotes. I quote, "No one has the right to judge you because no one knows what you've been through. They may have heard stories, but they didn't feel what you felt in your heart." So maybe when he was beating her, he felt he was doing a good thing. That's what he's telling us.
Okay, moving on. Her relationship with friends, she had a few friends in school, and then she met the old poet. And I just wanted to touch on how she grew as a poet. First of all, how she actually became a poet, and then how that was nurtured, and the impact the relationship with the old poet has had on her.
So it starts quite young, right? Doesn't it? She talks about the tiger burning bright poem and that.
Which is her mother, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and she practically educates herself, doesn't she, after she's finished high school, because her parents can't afford to send her to university. So she's at home with nothing to do. So what does she do? She just picks up poetry books and then just educates herself, reading all these books and writing and reading and writing, and then eventually starts sending off her writing to publications. I really admire that, where many people would have given up. She decides that actually, she's not going to be beaten. She's going to find something to do, find something that she's good at, and then she's going to nurture.
Yeah, that maybe that like that self-determination that comes through quite, that you need that in hero's story, the moment where they pick themselves up. But also I suppose in a way, even though it's only fleeting, like there is a strong literary tradition in the Caribbean, perhaps not like widely known. She like talks about herself as part of a wider movement.
Yeah.
Which is quite nice, like to giving some profile to like others in the region that she eventually comes into contact with. Pardon the pun, a bit closer than she would like on some occasions. But yeah.
There's also the issue of survival, isn't there? Because there's the issue of surviving her father when she's primarily living under his roof while she's younger, and all the strictures that he places on, particularly his daughters and wife, but the whole family, but not on himself. And as the quote from Marlon James, to read it is to believe that words can save. So when we consider the fact that her mum may well have been depressed and how she was self-medicating with the weed that she was smoking to a very prodigious level, there was parts of the book where she seemed to be either going into a depression herself or close to some kind of nervous breakdown, emotional distress, whatever you want to call it. And the poetry, as I think her mum also was talking about, poetry can help her to get some of this angst, get some of this emotion out in a safe way. And also there's that fact that, yes, she got the scholarship, but the parents didn't seem to have any career path or any particular plan or route for her. Okay, she's growing older, she's going to complete this stage of education, what next? It's like they're not really thinking about anything. I'm not saying that they're necessarily going to have to know everything, but surely I would have thought that they would have started to consider, okay, what does she do next? Does she...
She was supposed to marry a nice Rasta man, remember?
Oh, come on. I mean...
But that's what the father wanted for her.
Then why bother with the whole education thing?
It was the mother that bothered with the education.
I thought her father was quite aspirational for her to be a scientist or something like that at a certain point. It would be more true to his controlling system, I'd have thought, if he did just want to marry her off safely to a Rasta man. But that isn't actually mentioned, is it? There's never any pressure on her in that sort of direction that or maybe I didn't pick it up anyway.
Even leave the place to meet a man, so I don't even know how that would have happened. So yeah,
he would have found one for her.
I hear what you're saying about them not knowing what comes next, but that doesn't surprise me. I think like particularly in low income backgrounds, where just get a good education, just get the education, and just to give yourself more options, even if you don't necessarily know what comes afterwards. And maybe that's some of the challenges for kids who do well but are from backgrounds with parents who don't have the networks or don't know how the education system works. Sometimes it's just get the good grades and it will all work out for you.
And I think that's still pretty much the case now, even in this country where you have kids going to school and with no guidance whatsoever from the parents, because the parents themselves don't know any better. And so you rely on the career service at school, or you just muddle your way through and try and find something that you're good at.
Yeah,
when we say get an education, what does that mean? Up to secondary school, or does that mean up to A level, or is that university?
It depends where you are, right? Like, I think in this country, that argument has been just go to, get to uni, get yourself a degree. And then that's a good thing. Of course, it's a good thing that people can go, but we've seen the downsides of that, right? Where do you take that degree? There is, whether people like it or not, there's a hierarchy around what degree you have and from what university. But I think in the time they're writing, this is already a huge success. You've come from extreme poverty, and you're a Rastafarian, and you're from certain parts of Jamaica and living in government housing or wherever, and you've got a scholarship and you've left with decent grades from one of the top schools in the island. By many accounts, she's winning.
Mm. So we're not talking about the old poet then?
That dirty old man.
Or the old Lech?
But how? I think he had a huge impact on her and her success.
Yeah, he definitely does, and that was one of the conversations I was reflecting on afterwards. It's easy to read that story and go, terrible, me too, da 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 da, bad, bad, bad. But there probably is a bit more nuance to it, right?
He seems to have put much more into it than someone like Derek Walcott, who behaved like a diva because she was late, and it's like, well, how dare you be late? Would you be late if I were Auden? This is like disrespectful and all the rest. He seemed so precious, whereas the old poet seemed to take the long view. And he also recognized the fact that she would outgrow him. And I don't know whether there was a kernel of fear that she would outgrow him, she would eclipse him, and he knew it.
If you look at her story, if she hadn't been discovered, as it were, by him when he saw the potential in those poems that she'd submitted and invited her to his class and all that, I mean, maybe she'd have, still been a successful poet. But I think he had a big impact on her. Now, I mean, he saw the poems before he saw her. He obviously did pick up something in those poems. So maybe she'd have made it, as it were, with or without him. But she'd have probably needed somebody to steer her onto the way. And yes, he didn't behave very well. But when you said about the beatings and that the acceptability of that in a certain era, Kay, I think the idea that a man could make a pass at you, and we take it so seriously now, rightly. I think it's good that we do, but I do think that the world has changed a little bit. The old poet obviously gave her a lot of help.
Sorry, Kay, you were saying?
No, I just agreed with what Katrina just saying. I'd be very surprised if she was the only one.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, he would have thought that was okay, wouldn't he?
And it would have been for a long time. Like, even the stuff that came out, about Derek Walcott was sometime later. And there've been all, different industries, like yada, yada, yada. Academia isn't immune from that as well, so.
Was this after Derek Walcott had died, or during his lifetime?
During his lifetime, I think. Didn't he, allegedly, but didn't he...
Afraid of being sued.
I don't know what recordings Jackie's going to...
Well, he can't himself sue, so would it be his estate that would sue you? I don't know. But anyway, allegedly.
There was something when he was alive, because he died only recently, but there was a position there was like a position he was nominated for when he was alive. According to Wikipedia, in 2009, Walcott was a leading candidate for the position of Oxford Professor of Poetry. He withdrew his candidacy after reports of the accusations against him of sexual harassment from 1981 and 1996. I find it,
But then the same thing happened to Stuart Hall, didn't it? So it's all these...
Didn't it? Stuart Hall as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of... Yeah. accusations that came out about him as well. Anyhow, we've kind of touched on the writing as we were talking about it, but not in that much detail. I just wanted to ask what you felt about the narrative voice and also the style of writing, and how did that affect your enjoyment of the memoir?
So I would agree. Here's the thing, it wasn't bad, right? It's clearly like well written. She clearly has a particular style. I just found it very wordy. I think somebody earlier said about lyrical and it goes on. I think I lean towards the Diane Abbott just style of just give it to me like straight, rather than this let's dance around the door and then we'll open it sort of way of writing. But that's not to say that I didn't appreciate it for what it was. And there were moments where she was very good at creating these images. So you've got this sense of emotion in different things. And I read out one of the comments, and I'm going to try to say it again without laughing. But she has this back and forth with Uncle Clive. And then she said at his table, his plate was empty except for a pile of mangled chicken bones, all the red marrow sucked out. I just thought that was such a brilliant image. Like one, just that, and two, she's just saying something about him just sucking the emotion or the feeling out of a room, out of a conversation. So there were definitely highlights throughout, but equally, she was 7 years old forever. It felt like,
She was,
and then it definitely, there was a distinct maybe change in pacing from the first half. And as we've talked through it, I get, she's laying down this childhood and what was built up. And if you understand that, you really get a sense of what was knocked down through his later behaviour, through her father's later behaviour. So, sorry, a bit of a ramble there. I appreciate it for what it was, but there were times where I definitely just wanted it to get to the point or move on as I was reading.
What do people think of it starts with her talking about this woman in white who she's kind of, you then realise she's seeing as a potential future self. And then there's other time, I think near the end, she's standing in the sea and she's looking back and she's talking about seeing all her grandmothers or something like that, that have gone before her. I didn't think that it worked that well, because in between those bits you've got, yes, a very lyrical story, but it is, and very detailed, but it is just a sort of this happened and this happened and this happened, telling us, about her life. So I'm not quite sure about this woman in white business that pops up. I think she maybe twice goes to her. So I wonder what other people thought of that.
It didn't work for me, I have to admit. I found it a little bit confusing as well, because I was trying to work out whether, is this a ghost? Is this some kind of apparition? Is this really something that she's perceiving, or is this something that is imagined? I couldn't quite work out. So it didn't really work all that well for me. And the whole idea, I found myself kind of just tutting and kind of just rolling my eyes. That whole idea of looking back on the beach and just seeing this line of women that takes you all the way back to Eve or something. I just thought, oh yeah, right. You're a poet, and you're never going to let us forget that you're a poet.
Yeah. 100% agree with Tyra. It was unnecessary. I didn't know if it was a real person, not a real person, until like the third time they popped up. I was like, okay, clearly it's not. The bit at the end just seemed a bit. I was just like, it's just. These are the bits which could have helped cut the book. It's only a small amount, but these are the sections where it could have been a little bit shorter. Just seemed a bit cliche. I feel like I've seen stuff like that in a film before, or some just like ancestors. It didn't add anything to it at all, basically. So yeah, I didn't appreciate it.
I would say the same thing. I was confused as well. Couldn't work out who the woman in white was at the beginning. I thought, oh, was it perhaps one of her grandmothers? Is she imagining, a ghost of her grandmother, for example? And then she pops up again. And also the build-up. The build-up was so long because you meet the woman in white at the beginning, and then it's more than over halfway through the book that she comes up again. And so the build-up from the beginning until then, he's just like, what was the point of her at the beginning? Why did she pop up at the beginning? So I didn't like it, and I didn't understand it, and I thought it was unnecessary. I mean, she's already doing a good enough job reflecting on her life and reflecting on the things that are going on and why she's turned out the way she has. I don't think she needed the woman in white as a narrative device to tell that, because her writing is already good enough to tell that anyway. And with regards to the writing style itself, wasn't my favorite. I mean, I think maybe if I was reading one of her poems, I would enjoy it, but I don't think it worked in a memoir. And like Kay, I'm with the Diane Abbott style. Just, write it as it is, tell me as it is, and let's get on with it.
Yeah, because it's a memoir, but at the same time, I mean, some parts of it, when you're saying about it's very lyrical, where she's talking about the red belt, and she's saying, but at 12, I was still young enough to keep approaching him being her father, a kicked dog, slinking back, doing as my mother did. So the way that she's described, her mother and her relationship to her father, and the fact that they keep going back to him, is so poetic in just one sentence. She's kind of encapsulated the whole thing, which was fantastic. But she layers it upon layers it upon layers it. It's like overkill.
And I think this is where we've spoken before about an editor. Did it need?
Yeah.
I don't know. That always feels like a cheeky thing to say. An editor should have gone over this again. But there just seemed to be like a series of incidents, and then maybe bring it back to like the intended audience for this book, who it was aimed at. I do get this ratcheting up the challenge. So the payoff when she becomes a model and she becomes a poet is even greater. But that first half of the book, definitely I could have learned that in fewer words.
In 3 or 4 chapters. That's how I felt. I just thought she was between the ages of 5 and 8 for way too long. And also some of the things she was writing were like, but at age 5, would you really? Is that how you would analyze? Is that how you'd look at things?
Didn't somebody say, I think it was Isaac, who said 2 points he made. One about your memory of traumatic events. You might not remember years, but you'll remember particular incidents and you'll hone in on them. And then I think somebody else made the point that she thanks her siblings. So it doesn't sound like she's relied on her own memory. Solid memory to write this book. She's spoken to other people.
Yeah, I agree. I think with traumatic events, I think you're going to have core memories, and then as now she's older, you may know how you felt, but now as she's older, she's probably able to articulate her feelings better now as a 41-year-old woman as when she was 5. So I believe it. Like, we just, what she went through, I'm not surprised half of that stuff stuck in her head or were buried and other people had to help her fill in the gaps. It was very believable for me.
I think for me it was more the analytical or the analyzing.
Well, I think as an older person, I think that's how she's able to analyze it better. But
yeah.
I mean, yes, an editor would have been helpful. My impression is she's put down every single thing she can remember, and plus probably what her brother and sisters can remember as well, so that you've got far, far, far too much. It's nicely written, although it's too dense. But yes, it just needs thinning out. And also I found, like what Jackie was saying, that the fact that we've got this woman in white bit at the beginning, and okay, you get that that's an introduction and we're going to now get the story that leads to that. But well, it takes so long. And that's what also made me impatient with the book, because I was sort of thinking, well, come on, what did happen? Why are you standing there and there's this woman in white? I was sort of waiting for that part to be resolved, which if we'd never had it and we just had the history of her from a child going through, perhaps we didn't need that sort of introduction at all. It just distracted, I think. I did still enjoy it, really, despite all these things we're saying about it.
I do get the sense this is for an American audience. I don't know whether because it's the pacing and the way the story is articulated. I know people here have said they didn't know much about Rastafarianism, but I feel like you maybe would have had more exposure to it, even if you didn't know the history of it, than the audience that seems to have really picked up on it in the US, particularly like some of the book club shows she's gone on and the interviews and the awards. So, and I'm guessing those are the circles she runs in now, because that's where she primarily teaches, that's where she's doing her PhD, etc. So for me, that puts some of the choices actually into like the editing choices, the tropes, the narrative, the some of this woman in white, that maybe puts some of those choices into context when I think about, this is maybe who was in mind. This is the audience in mind when she was writing it.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing to hearing what you find out. Right. So the book he's got really high reviews. I think it's 4.5 on Goodreads. And also Just Critics have reviewed it really highly. So on the cover itself, you have dazzling, electrifying, story about hope and resilience, which is fair enough. Lushly written and heart-stoppingly gripping. I don't know which part of it was heart-stoppingly gripping, but anyhow, I didn't feel that. And then Taiwo already said, I think it was you, Taiwo, what Marlon James said, to read is to believe, words can save. And the New York Times, a gripping tale of fundamentalism and the light of rebellion piercing through its cracks. So, what would be your summary of the book? Your one sentence about the book, and then a score out of 5.
There's clearly a bit of hyperbole in there, right, as well, isn't it?
Well, they have to kind of, don't they?
They do. And I sometimes think like those sorts of publications are almost patting themselves on the back for reviewing a book like this, as much as they are for what's inside the book. You know, look at us, aren't we branching out into these different readers and these different writers these days? Well done us. Yeah, well done you. I wouldn't say it was heart-stoppingly gripping. It was an enjoyable read. I think we've had an interesting discussion on the back of it. I'll stick with 3.75. It was a great. I'm pleased I read it. I'm glad it was on the list. I definitely felt like I've learned something. Quite enjoyed the exploration of these familial relationships, mother and mother, mother and daughter, father and daughter, and how you relate to different family members. But it didn't change my life.
Fair enough. Taiwo.
I'd say overly lush narrative of almost poverty porn memoir. And I'd give it a 3.5 to 3.75. I can't bear to give it a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
But I did enjoy it in some ways, but in other ways it just left me frustrated and perplexed.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Katrina?
Trying to come up with some good sentence, failing. I would say it's a very poetically, perhaps over poetically written story of growing up in Jamaica. It doesn't stand out particularly to me above lots of other books. I'd give it 3.5. I enjoyed it. I think there's lots of lovely writing in it, but that's the problem, too much lovely writing. And the story, well, Everyone's got a story about their upbringing and their father.
Yeah, I think like Tara said, the whole poetic style just overshadowed the narrative for me. I think fair enough, you're a poet, but I think there needs to be a bit of a balance, and she showed off too much that she was a poet, I suppose. Made things overly long, could have just gotten to the point a lot quicker. But despite all that, I did enjoy it. I don't think I would have finished it as soon as I did, though. I rushed it because of like book club, and it was a lot for me anyway. So yeah, 3.5. I enjoyed just learning about family dynamics, how close she is with her siblings as well, and her relationship with her mother. So all of that I enjoyed, but just needs to cut a lot of it out.
Right. So how would I describe it? I would say engaging but frustrating. So I would score it a 3.5 out of 5. I mean, and this is what I kind of struggled with. I mean, I finished. So I read the last half of it in one day or one afternoon. So it's not that I wasn't enjoying it. There's just a bit of a conflict with this book. It's just like you're enjoying it but not enjoying it at the same time. Anywho, thank you guys very much for another very engaging session. We're reading Dream Come next. And yeah, speak soon, guys.
See you later.
Okay, bye, Lynn. Bye.
Bye-bye. And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this or any of our other episodes, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And don't forget to share. Goodbye.